What's going on, everybody? I'm AJ Cueve, and this is a brand new series called Source Material. The idea is that I'm going to take an adapted work and compare it to the material that it's based on. For this inaugural episode, I'm going to be comparing 300 the movie to the 300 comic. Let's start with the source material. Technically, this story is based on an actual real-life event called the Battle of Thermopylae, but considering this isn't a history show, let's just dive into the comic. The comic came out in the late 90s, published by Dark Horse Comics, written and drawn by Frank Miller. Mr. Miller is a very prominent figure in the comic book community, being responsible for such things as Sin City, The Dark Knight Returns, both possible future episodes, Ronin, and a very famous run on Daredevil. The comic was met with positive reviews, winning 3 Eisner Awards, which is the comic book basic equivalency of their Oscars. It won for Best Writer/Artist, Best Limited Series, and Best Colorist thanks to Lynn Varley, who was actually married to Mr. Miller at the time. Now let's talk about the film adaptation. 300 came out in 2006 by Warner Brothers and was directed by Zack Snyder. Mr. Snyder, who you're going to be seeing a lot of on this show, has since gone on to do other comic-adapted films, such as Watchmen, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Justice League. He also directed the Dawn of Dead remake, and my personal favorite of his work, Sucker Punch. The cast consisted of Gerard Butler, Lena Headey, to go on to play Cersei in Game of Thrones, Dominic West, and marks the feature film debut of Michael freaking Fassbender.
Then we will fight in the shade.
The film was met with overwhelmingly positive reviews, with fans praising the over-the-top, gory fighting, the directorial style of Zack Snyder, and of course the performance from the cast. Let's not forget that until this moment, a lot of these period battle movies, such as Troy and Gladiator, were done pretty similarly. This film took a more brutal and, appropriately enough, comic book approach to the genre. Let's dive into the similarities between the comic and the movie. Basically all of it. I'm talking panels from the comic basically being used as the storyboards for the movie.
His hands are steady. His form perfect.
Our arrows will blot out the sun.
Then we will fight in the shade.
A lot of the dialogue, especially the narration from Dilios, is lifted almost verbatim from the comic.
Enter the boy,
given up for dead, returns to his people, to sacred Sparta, a king! Our king, Leonidas! Ho, ho, ho!
The dialogue is so similar, in fact, that it almost feels like the actors used the comic itself as the script.
Spartan!
Yes, milady.
Come back with your shield. Or on it.
Yes, milady.
goodbye, my love. He doesn't say it. There's no room for softness. Not in Sparta. No place for weakness. Only the hard and strong may call themselves Spartans. Only the hard. Only the strong.
The comic and the movie are so similar that I'm actually willing to say that this is the most closely adapted comic book movie I've ever seen.
Come, Leonidas. Let us reason together. It would be a regrettable waste. It would be nothing short of madness for you, brave king, and your valiant troops to perish. All because of a simple misunderstanding.
They fail our king's test. And a man who fancies himself a god feels a very human chill crawl up his spine.
If you know of a more closely adapted movie, please let me know.
And when Sparta burns, you shall bathe in gold. Fresh oracles shall be delivered to you daily from every corner of the empire.
Now let's talk about the differences between the comic and the movie. I don't feel like any of the changes that were made from the comic to the movie were done simply to be different. Everything was done with some kind of a purpose. One of the biggest changes were the scenes involving the Queen. In the movie, Queen Gorgo, who isn't even formally named in the movie, has an entire subplot where she's trying to convince the council to send reinforcements to aid Leonidas. None of this exists in the comics, and I think it's a great addition to the story. The pacing is benefited by giving us breaks from the battles, and it helps us better understand why Leonidas is so passionately in love with this woman, considering his last words both in the film and the comic are declarations of his love for her.
My queen!
Another change is the additional subplot between the captain and his son. While the son does die in the comics, we're not given the additional scenes with the captain interacting with his son. I think this was a great addition because it makes the emotional moment when the son dies that much more impactful. Another change from the comic to the movie, which I actually thought worked a little better in the comics, was the scene where Ephialtes is rejected by Leonidas. In the movie, Ephialtes warns Leonidas of a secret path that the Persians could use to flank them. After being rejected by Leonidas, Ephialtes is thrown into a fit of rage and Leonidas just kind of walks away, hoping that the Persians don't find out about this path and that Ephialtes doesn't do something stupid. Which he does. In the comic, however, Ephialtes is actually given a little bit more backstory, and after Leonidas rejects him, he actually throws himself off the cliff, presumably to his death. This makes more sense as to why Leonidas doesn't believe the Persians will ever find out about the secret path. Ephialtes will survive the fall, and the story basically plays out the same for him. There's also this scene in the comics where Stelios, in the movie he's played by Michael Fassbender, actually trips and falls and the captain beats the living crap out of him, until Leonidas beats the crap out of him. They go on to haze him for the rest of the story, calling him Stumblios. This doesn't exist in the movie, and instead they kind of give you this playful banter between Stelios and the son of the captain, which I actually thought worked a little bit better. However, in the comics, it does present a more harsh reality and the strictness of being a Spartan. Another scene added in the movie was the soft introduction of the Immortals. While the Immortals exist in the comic, they're introduced at the exact same time they're introduced in the battle. The movie adds this extra scene where it kind of hints at these creatures that can stand toe-to-toe with the Spartans, which I thought was great. Another addition to the movie was the inclusion of the monsters, such as the giant immortal and the choppy heady guy and the weird llama goat thing. The comic is actually based a little bit more on reality without the monsters, and the movie takes a more fantasy approach, which I thought was fine. These are the only real noticeable differences between the comic and the movie. Little things like Leonidas' age and the order of events also exist, but hardly worth mentioning.
This is blasphemy. This is madness.
Madness. This is Sparta!
I'm a fan of both the comic and the movie. However, in this instance, I actually feel like the movie's the better version of the story. The battles are way more visceral on screen, and the stylized approach by Zack Snyder fits really well. It's an embellished account of events being told by a person wanting to paint the imagery of the mighty few versus the evil horde. While the movie wouldn't exist without the great blueprints that is the 5-part series, I believe that this story's benefited greatly by being on screen. If there's another adaptation you'd like for me to take a look at, let me know in the comments below, or send me an email at genregeekscast@gmail.com. You should also check out the Genre Geeks podcast, available on all platforms. I'm AJ Cueve. See you next time.